นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอปารุธาเดสังอมัตถัสสะทาวราเยโสรวันทาบมุญชันตุสัทธัง So, welcome you to Amaravati and this Sunday afternoon reflection, Seeing Through Delusion. And of course, I could go on for hours with this subject and probably create more delusions for because talking tends to increase the delusions, thinking, talking, and so like the Buddha's emphasis was on mindfulness, which is being aware, just opening the mind to the pure conscious awareness in the present, where there isn't any delusion. And so but because we live in a society and we're highly conditioned to perceive through various conditions that we acquire as we grow up, so that those delusions are how we identify with them. We live with this in the world of thought and love and hate, like and dislike, true and false, with our cultural conditioning, our social identities, the ego, the sense of a separate self, and so it's all a delusion. But that's hard to take for most people because the real world tends to be what an individual thinks it is. So we find, sometimes we wonder why there's so much confusion and problems in our relationships, in the society we live in, the world at large, because we assume that everybody is pretty much thinks the world is the same world, and and yet when you get down to it, each one of us lives in our own separate creation. And so the Buddha was a brilliant kind of pointing at the way out of delusion. His whole emphasis and his teaching in the scriptures, the Pali scriptures that we have, are pointers, a way out of delusion, to see reality, to know ultimate reality. And from there, then we can deal with the conditions and the illusions, the delusions that we create in ourselves, and the way the society we live in perceives and operates according to the principles, standards, prejudice, biases, identities, and that every society has. It was very interesting. I was listening to on Radio 4 in the morning, the 6 o'clock, this program, Heart and Soul or something, about, they give this reflection on oneness, the universe and God, this Sunday morning. And now there's so much, interest in religion. What is the purpose and function of religion? And of course the Pope Benedict is visiting England at this time. So there's a lot of interesting discussions going on around what the Pope is saying, and the scandals that have been that we all hear about through the media in their own Catholic Church. Plus the Pope as a visitor of the state, who's representative of millions of Catholic Christians. And then there's an awareness, a kind of awakened awareness happening, where the more intuitive style of human endeavor is becoming more acceptable or more acknowledged. And so, like saying this is just my reflection on this subject is that, we're conditioned to see things from a certain perspective after we're born. When a baby is newly born, it doesn't have an identity, it doesn't think of itself as a person, as an English baby or a Thai baby or anything else. It's just it doesn't think through words or language, and so but it is conscious, and it's a human form that's conscious. So trying to prepare the ground for what actually takes place at birth in terms of this subject, where the delusions begin. Because the baby has, of course, its instinctual intelligence, its survival instincts, its needs, and knows how to, use this instinctual intelligence to survive. Let the mother know what it needs and so forth in ways that babies do that are universal. Wherever a baby's born, it very much acts in the same way. And then as we, after it's born, then we start conditioning it to identify you're my little baby, my darling, and you're a baby boy or baby girl, and you're a nice English baby, or so these are the acquisitions after birth. There's no, like a baby has no nationality, isn't aware of a difference of a boy and a girl or what society it's in. But it's conscious, but it's the conscious form. So this consciousness is pure. It's not adulterated with conditioning yet. It's our ability as an individual form. It's what we live with is consciousness, and then we are conditioned. And the consciousness then is clouded over with the various conditions that we acquire after birth, after we're born. So the identity with the body, this is me, my body, I look like this, I'm a boy, I'm, American, I'm a Buddhist monk, I identify with my age, with my position, and these are all conditions that one acquires through the early years, and then as one grows up, the identities that one has in terms of position in society and relationship to others, and the cultural attitudes that each culture provides us with. So, since there are many different nationalities here, different cultural backgrounds, that it's each one, when we look at our particular cultural conditioning, we see, that this identity and how we're conditioned through this cultural identity, we tend to interpret our life experience. Right and wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is true, false, this is appropriate behavior, this is wrong behavior. And we have the kind of standard role models of what a good child should be, a good boy, good girl, good student, and then we're rewarded and punished accordingly. So when we're bad boys, then we get punished. When we're good boys, generally speaking, we get rewarded. And so, just pointing to this dualistic realm that we're experiencing, the conditioned realm of the physical body. I mean, it's like we have separate physical bodies. So I'm here and you're there, and I have to perceive you through this position here. I can't perceive you from where you're sitting. But this is so obviously true, but yet sometimes we don't really reflect on the reality of this situation. What it's like to be an individual, a human, separate individual that's conscious. So just using the sense of consciousness as universal rather than as personal. Like we tend to think of consciousness like our bodies, like it's my consciousness and your consciousness. Well, this applies to the body, my body and your body, because we can actually, through sight, we see that you're there and I'm here. But also, changing from this separateness, this sense of separation, duality, to pure consciousness, then that is oneness. And we can only recognize oneness through the intuitive ability of a human individual. So that's our great gift as a human is the great gift of our humanity is that we can reflect on Dhamma, or the way things are, not through taking positions from cultural attitudes or class biases or gender or power positions, or whether you're rich or poor or whatever nationality you might identify with. When we begin to like mindfulness, this word that the Buddha emphasized, the essence of the Buddha's teaching, the axis of it, the center point, is the ability we have to be mindful, being awake and present here and now, reflective on what we're experiencing through consciousness that we project into consciousness. So the delusion, seeing through delusions, is what we do. We tend to interpret our life through our sense of self, our ego, our biases, prejudices, perceptions that we've acquired. And the aim of the Buddhist practice, his basic teaching, the Four Noble Truths, is a skillful means that he used to direct our attention to beyond just the conditioning of the mind, to the recognizing and appreciating pure consciousness, and the only way that we can ever really do that is through mindfulness or awareness, by opening to the present moment and just reflecting on the way things are. So the Buddha's teaching tends to simplify everything from the complexities of the different conditions in this room. How many people are here, and how many male, female, how many, are of this age, middle-aged, young, old, Buddhist or non-Buddhist. Then it gets into all kinds of complicated statistics, and makes, confuses our mind when we try to figure out and completely explain all the different conditions here. So instead of working on that level of statistics and numbers and qualities, he pointed to all the thing that all conditioned phenomena as a characteristic share is that all conditions are impermanent. So this makes life much more simple, because we're looking at this characteristic of conditioned phenomena rather than our particular attitudes towards men and women or Asian or Europeans or Buddhist or non-Buddhist or whatever. It also have a way of looking at our own goodness and badness, our virtues, our vices, our good thoughts, our evil thoughts, and the shadowy conditions that appear in consciousness, and the beautiful ones, and the confused states that we are all subjected to, because they're such a myriad of qualities and conditions, and they all can take, they can be external. We can see things only what is an object, or we complicate ourselves by also thinking about ourselves in various complicated ways, how good or bad or lovable or unlovable and right and wrong one can perceive in your own, the way you see yourself through, before you project outward, you're looking at yourself from the critical mind. and from the cultural attitudes, the biases that we get through what the Thai people think is right behavior or wrong, and what the English perceive as right and wrong. Or what's the best or what's the worst. So this is, this brings us into this sense of a unified consciousness, in which then, once we begin to fully appreciate that, then we have our perspective on the different conditions that each one of us has experienced in the present. So if we just worked on what each one of you is, what feeling you have at this moment, then, so we start from here, and you tell me how you're feeling, then we try, by the end of get to the back of the room, everybody's bored, so everybody might think, this is boring, or they might get up and leave. And what have we gained, except just more confusion in our mind? But if we begin to recognize the unified consciousness, the oneness, then we can start looking at the way we tend to cling to the conditioning that we project into consciousness, the habit tendencies, the emotions, the fears and desires and loves and hates and so forth that are changing and dependent on other conditions. So on the condition level, we're changing conditions, each one of us, because what you're experiencing in the back of the room right now, if I did what I threatened you with, the condition you're feeling now, you might think, that'd be interesting, but by the time we reach you probably have a different feeling. And that's the way conditioned phenomena is. It changes very quickly. Also, to put into perspective the human condition in the planet that we live on, the universe we're living in, we're experiencing through this form, the individual form, is that it's sensitive form, and like birth, when a baby's born, it's thrown out from the mother's protective state, the womb, into a vast universal impingement. So it's a separate physical form that is going to pick up all the different conditions affecting it in whatever place it's in. And so so we're born into a sense realm, a sensitive realm. And this is why when we don't understand this, then we're always feeling this sense of threat or fear or anxiety, worry, because the conditions are changing and we have very little ability to control and manipulate them to the conditions we want. We have to more or less learn how to respond to changing conditions, many of which through life's experiences we don't want or don't like. So, and that's what sensitivity means. Sensitivity has no permanent quality. That's not permanent pleasant sensation or permanent unpleasant sensation. And then through the senses themselves, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, these senses are also subject to conditions. So we see something we like, and then we feel attracted to it. We see something we don't like, we want to get rid of it. So this is what we call dualism. Everything has, the best. If there's the best, there's the worst. If there's good, there's bad. Heaven, then there has to be hell. Right, then there's wrong. One, also is connected to its opposite. Where in pure consciousness, since it isn't conditioned, it's not dualistic, but it has the continuity, because it's a oneness, that in which we tend to ignore or seldom really recognize or experience. And of course, I think children sometimes, when we're fairly innocent and not totally conditioned yet, when our egos have not been set in stone yet, where they're still changeable, you can experience kind of mystical experiences or unexplainable experiences of oneness, or that which sometimes, innocent children can readily experience, or tune into energies or things that are no longer socially or religiously recognized. So, children, they call it fantasy, or you're just make-believe or pretending. But how do we know? Are they, how do we know anything outside our own conditioning? The way we've been told is this is right, this is wrong, this is delusion, this is the truth. And then we tend to interpret our experience always through these perceptions that we're conditioned with. And I remember, when I was a little boy, I think I must have been about 4 years old, I was looking from our house, from the front window, across the street into this woodland, which was across the road from where we lived. And I saw a lion in the woodland with red eyes. So I told my mother, and she said, "Oh, there isn't any lion there." But I swear, and I wasn't making it up, but I saw it. Now what it was, I have no knowledge of. And it doesn't make any sense according to, my social background, or, if it belonged to some group that believed in these kind of things, my mother might have said, you've been fortunately visited by one of the protectors of the world. But she didn't. She said, no, it's a fantasy. And so years later, when I was a monk, I went to see my sister, who lived in Southern California, and we were reminiscing about old times when we were children. And so I told her, I don't think I ever told her about this lion, but anyway, I told her about this vision I had. And she goes into a kind of state of stunned consciousness. I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I saw that lion." Well, that's unexplainable, isn't it? That doesn't make sense, or it's not right, it is but how do we know? Because we are very, committed to very strict ways of perceiving reality. And, you go into, you hear about anthropologists going to remote tribes in the Amazon jungle or something, and they perceive things in a very different way. And of course, we've got the conceit that we're advanced and civilized and they're savages. But that's another perception, isn't it? That's a cultural bias that being American, we're very convinced we're the kind of advanced state of democracy that the rest of the world should follow. And so that is, that's part of a cultural perception, isn't it? You're not born with that. And so each culture has its own particular convictions of its own sense of reality and what's right and wrong. And so like the problems we have, say, in Afghanistan, or the Taliban, or the Iranians, and these different, that the common attitude towards these cultures or these groups is that they're wrong, and that we know what they should do. So then this is, this is, we really believe it, that the way the Taliban act is evil and that we're right. And in many ways, according to our values, our perceptions, our conditions, it makes sense. But of course, from their position, it's something else, how they perceive the world, from their cultural conditioning, their religious, the attitudes they've developed from their religion. And this is where it's so difficult to understand each other very well, because we're operating from two different bases, two different conditioned attitudes, two cultural, that are very culturally different. That's very interesting in being born in the United States, and where you're brought up with this very egalitarian attitude of everybody's equal, and the freedom to say what you want, and all these kind of ideals of democracy and rights and so forth that one is programmed with. And of course, I grew up during the Second World War, and we were very patriotic, at wartime, saluting the stars and stripes and singing, what is it? Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition song. And of course, Hitler was, perfect villain. He's one of the most perfect villains that we have in history. And so, it's easy to hate Hitler if you're an American, or European, or even German. But this is because he fulfilled the role of a villain, and he was very destructive in his attitude towards Jews and others, and his megalomania desire to conquer the world. So, as long as we're operating from these conditioned attitudes, then where can we find a modus vivendi? Where can we come to agreements? What is it that, say, we could all agree to, say, on a moral level, just say, on just taking a moral precept that we should agree to? And of course, the first precept in the Buddhist tradition, the 5 precepts, is to refrain from intentionally killing another human. So this is, in most societies, it's a criminal offense to kill with intention another human being. Except if, then we have our exceptions. It's all right to kill them if they're the Taliban, or Hitler, or Saddam Hussein. To kill off the evil ones, you see. So then this moral principle is, say in the Buddhist perspective, is, there's no exceptions to it. It's not like, it's all right to kill the enemy, but don't kill your friends or your family or your countrymen. And now, war has reached this abominable level of, where we're not intention of killing innocent bystanders, but with the modern weapons, it's no longer just warriors fighting on a battlefield, but it's dropping bombs that usually kill everyone but the one you're aiming at. So it's pretty grim. It's collateral damage, isn't it? It's a kind of euphemism to hide the horrible reality behind it, behind those kind of impersonal words. But when you talk to people that have actually, or hear reports of people living in areas that are bombed, they don't see themselves as collateral damage, or the loss of their mothers or husbands or children or wives or whatever as collateral damage. It's personal. It's something that brings us grief. It's a trauma that we have to, that the individuals experience. Where collateral damage is just kind of like, just collateral damage, and it kind of hides the ugliness behind it, and oftentimes justifies the action. So we have these delusions of righteous wars and views about a just war. We've got to get rid of the evil forces. We've got to save we've got to protect our own country, our family, from the enemy, from the demons, from the villains. So this is the cultural conditioning that makes us fight and separate, hate, where we have prejudices and preferences. We also have these ideals that we're all equal. That's an ideal, of an ideal is at the very peak, the very best. And then the ideal is beautiful, but then the realities of this moment is, where does equality lie? Are we all equal here? And then we look at, because we're aware of the differences. And so where we're the same, where we're totally equal, is in consciousness, in the oneness. And then the differences are in the forms, different appearances, the conditioning process, the age of the body, the self-references and cultural attitudes. And so by reflecting on the way it is, we're bringing attention to why society, why the world is like this. And then I had this interview of this man that was in Jerusalem recently, and of course they're having these talks, Middle Eastern conferences between the Israelis and Palestinians to form agreements on learning how to live with each other, and whose land is this, and establish the boundaries and so forth. That these kind of conferences have been going on for how many years? Ever since the rise of Israel as a separate state. So anyway, this man was in the Palestinian part of Jerusalem, and which was where the old part of Jerusalem, where the Palestinians, Israeli Arabs who have lived there for like generations, hundreds of years. And he was talking about in the marketplace, there's it's not a tourist area, and so they don't have a lot of kitsch souvenirs. They have more or less like markets that sell fruit and things that people need. But he also came across where they were selling T-shirts, and he saw this T-shirt that on the front of it had all these people kind of laughing, great paroxysms of laughter, belly laughter. And then on the back it said, peace accord in the Middle East. I think we can all laugh at that, because, the oneness and the first precept, do not intentionally kill, there's no agreement on that. And then on both sides, and then there's no, two different cultural attitudes, different conditions, perceptions, values, fears, and seeing each other as the enemy. And then the reflection on the unity of consciousness, I don't think they ever thought of that. And also the ability we have to agree, just on basic, on one moral, very good moral direction, is not to intentionally kill another human being. So this is just, my own reflections on, what is really important to our harmony and peace in the Middle East. The actual that which would really allow that to happen is never discussed. It's always arguments about whose land is it, and you did this and you did that, and trying to come to some kind of agreement on how to live with each other as separate states, with one not dominating the other, but it never comes to any practical agreements and putting those agreements into practice. Why? Because of this ignorance, the not being able to see through the illusions they have. Then how can you change the reaction? Maybe we could enforce a peace accord, just through kind of force and using power and forcing them to do it in some way or another, blackmailing them, threatening them. But actually those kind of, when we use tyranny as our means to get what we want, then we might suppress the feelings for a while, but the basic problem has never been addressed. And so when the tyranny kind of loses its power and weaknesses or fails, then the wars erupt, and the terrorism, the bombing, and the killing, and the blaming continue as it has been in the past. So the delusion of life is not the conditions themselves, but our not knowing anything beyond it. So our reality is the way it is. It's this is my body, and I'm this person. I'm this name I have this position. I'm this age of this body, and then I have my own personal views of myself. How I see myself as a person. And then there's what you think I am, and the perceptions you project onto me. And so, because I have lived a virtuous life in the monastic, Buddhist monasticism, there's a certain amount of, merit from this, because, I haven't intentionally killed anyone. Not since I became a monk. I never have. It doesn't mean I haven't felt like it sometimes. You live in monasteries, but I don't act on that. And the monks and nuns, they don't act on it. They probably have the same impulses. So in the way of doing good and not doing bad, refrain from doing what is harmful. This is good advice. So in immoral agreements and in something that's very useful, because we all have good and bad tendencies. We can love and hate and be jealous and be fair and understanding or selfish or malicious or whatever. These kind of emotions, attitudes, and that arise in our minds. And so, they, because of the conditioning and basic needs for survival and procreation of the species. The instinctual needs that we share with animals are also influencing our consciousness. So like in the animal realm, it's survival of the fittest, isn't it? Of course, they live their lives, they have a certain way of relating and acting, but it's not about not intentionally killing another animal. They can't agree to that. It's beyond their ability to agree on the first precept. So you can't judge the animal realm by our sense of moral propriety. because they are what they are. Like a cat can only be a cat, its karma, its form, its shape, is that of a cat. So when it sees a bird, it wants to grab it, kill it. And of course, living here in England, this is frowned upon. I mean, we love animals too much to justify. So, like in the monastery, I don't know how many of the monks and nuns have tried to train the cats not to kill birds. But I don't think any have ever succeeded. Or the cat does it when we're not around. So this is a reflection on the way things are, that the animal realm, this is a fear realm. There's a lot to fear, isn't there? In just being a separate, vulnerable form that we are. Being a human form in this vast universe, in a realm where everything's living off each other. And when you begin to contemplate nature, it's all about, one species eating another, killing another, and on like that. That's just the natural way of things in this realm of birth and death and sensitivity, survival, and procreation. Now we share those same instincts and tendencies with the animal realm. So we're actually living in a realm that is survival. It's a fear, behind it all is fear. And when we identify, when our only identity is with ourself as a human body, this body, then there is a lot to fear, because it can be harmed, it can be considered collateral damage by somebody else if you get killed. It's subject to the sexual drive. It's subject to, we also very sensitive on the level of praise and blame. In that physically we're quite vulnerable, emotionally we're vulnerable. So that if somebody insults us or humiliates us, we feel terribly hurt or traumatized or angry by what somebody says or what we think they say, or just by the way somebody looks at us. Somebody looks hostile and hateful at you, and then you what do? You tend to contract. Suddenly fear arises from some look from somebody else. And so this is pointing to this state of sensitivity. It's like this. It's about pleasure, pain, about, success and failure, praise and blame. Our human society is, to have power and not be weak, to be strong and to, protect ourselves and our families and our property at all costs, and to, then blame others or blames oneself or whatever in terms of our, what goes wrong in our lives. So we live in a, society that's about praising and blaming, giving awards and punishing, trying to protect our society or our families. Like here in England, the past 20 years or so, there's an incredible amount of regulations promoted by these different governments. It's called the nanny state, where anything that might cause harm is they make a law against doing it. So you're in a society that tries to regulate, and prevent harm, and outlawing every possibility of danger, or possible danger, or perceived danger. And in the process, we have a very complicated, bureaucratic society, because there's no end to the dangers of this realm. and as much as we try to regulate it and punish the criminals, it seems to still go on, we have periods where it gets better and periods where it gets worse. But in the interest in the Buddhist practice then of mindfulness, developing this mindfulness is a great gift of the human species, is that we can reflect. We can contemplate our own existence. We can, not just operate from this sense of me as a separate personality, or my view of life is that I've acquired from the American perspective, or my own language or thinking patterns. When I do that, then I create more division, more separation, more problems, because it's each one of us has our own different tendencies and attitudes and expectations and fears, dreads. Some of the people that tell me about their emotional problems, because sometimes I don't get it, because what they're talking about doesn't bother me in the least. But it obviously bothers them, So who's right and who's wrong? But bringing into consciousness, like what I'm trying to do this afternoon, is to point to the way it is. It's not blaming it on anybody. It's not blaming God. It's not blaming anything other than recognizing this realm that we're experiencing, that is trying to reflect on the way it is, and then also pointing at the way that we can reflect on it, to begin to recognize a natural state of oneness that's here and now, but which we've forgotten about, or we've never really consciously recognized in our lives. So then this emphasis on mindfulness in the past 20 years, I've noticed here in England, the emphasis on this, where, say, when I first came to live here in 1977, very few, it was like meditation. People say they were secret meditators. They didn't dare tell anyone because it was too weird, too strange a thing to be doing. If you told your friends, I'm going off to meditate, they think, what's wrong with her, You're doing something strange and maybe frightening, because you don't quite know what she's going to do, what she's up to. And so you kind of, and now meditation is quite de rigueur, it's fashionable, and they talk about it everywhere. Well, that's a good thing, because it's now kind of in the consciousness of this society here in England. It's, how many people will do it or appreciate it, but it's no longer just some weird thing that some eccentric person might be interested in doing. And mindfulness, the word mindfulness is used a lot now in psychotherapy and psychology. And so this word is the essence, really. The whole teaching of the Buddha is based around this. It's not that's why it's not a doctrinal position the Buddha is taking. It's not asking you to believe in something that he creates from his own cultural background or from his personal experience of life. So it's not like a personal philosophy or a cultural attitude, but mindfulness is a natural state that we use, but we may not appreciate or recognize. Now, even though we would have died, in infancy if we were never mindful. It's absolutely a necessity for survival, mindfulness. But the Buddha raised it up to not just to instinctual mindfulness out of fear or survival, but in a society of encouraging people towards skillful living, towards being responsible for their lives, for their action and speech, leading them onward to being good individuals, good citizens, good people, and refrain from following the negative impulses, acting on them or speaking on them. So it's like training, develop this sense of self-respect as a person, as a member of society, as a member of your family, in which is in acting and speaking in ways that's worthy of respect. That we feel safe, we feel appreciated, we feel right about ourselves when we don't intentionally kill another human being, at least, or when we don't lie to people or try to intentionally deceive others, or take things that don't belong to us, or just use our sexual instincts just for selfish pleasures without concern for anyone else, or taking drugs and drinking, kind of muddling our consciousness to where we don't know right from wrong. We're just caught in this confused state and unable to be mindful of it. So the 5 precepts are a guide that of training oneself to be just a good human being, and to not be just blaming your suffering and unhappiness in your life on always blaming somebody else for it, but it's like taking responsibility. It's like growing up, maturing, recognizing that you have to live your life, and you can't just, if you become the victim of life, it's because you're blaming. I didn't get the opportunities or the chances, or that somebody else, that you perceive others have had, or somebody else's fault that I suffer. And so the first noble truth is based on the common experience that all human beings can recognize easily as suffering. So notice that the aim of the Buddha's teaching is taking the common condition that all human beings can recognize, whether they're, from the top of the top echelon of the Queen Elizabeth to the lowest miserable, wretched human being, and all gradations, permutations in between those two extremes, then we all experience suffering. And so, if one is very, has good health and good education and good opportunities, good parents, good everything, they still suffer. Well, not to mention those that don't. So it's not about, the poor should meditate, but because they're the ones that really suffer, but the suffering of the rich also is the first noble truth, as well as the poor, or the fortunate or unfortunate. Well, this is a kind of empowerment, isn't it? It's not because we're poor we can't get anywhere. We can't awaken to the real. We're just the victim of of the position we were born into, poor family, unloved, unwanted, etc., and make that our way of relating to life. But awareness is our ability to perceive that as a condition. It's not judging it as wrong or bad, but it's noting that how we perceive ourselves is a creation that we are habituated to experience life through our own self-views and biases or prejudices or attitudes. With mindfulness, we're seeing through those delusions. We're beginning to recognize this pure consciousness, the reality that's unitive rather than divisive or separative or comparing one thing as being better than another. So the consciousness of a poor person and a wealthy person, it's the same thing. The suffering each one is experiences different. But so it's not about, saying certain type of suffering, but it's just suffering, or this basic delusion of separateness, of fear that we have, of the fear of the future, worry, anxiety about the future, self-disparagement, seeing ourselves from our critical minds, comparing ourselves with others, envying others, or hating others, or resentments that we carry from traumas or unfair experiences that we remember from the past. We begin to see these in terms of what they are in the present. They arise and cease. And this awareness then, this mindfulness, gives this perspective on your own emotional habits, self-views, fears, desires, whatever quality they might have in the present. They are conditioned phenomena that arise and cease. So this, when you really begin to appreciate this, is simplifying everything, a way of reflecting, that we begin to have perspective on the conditioned realm that isn't judgmental, but merely recognizing the common characteristic of impermanence. And that will take us to more awareness of that the conditioned realm, its very nature, is unsatisfying, because we can't petrify it or hold to it and keep it a certain way, and so we have to deal with this continuous change and threat of loss, we might be successful now, but who knows next year what will happen. Or we have lots of money in the bank now, but next year we don't know if we will have any left. So there's all possibilities of anxiety, worry about the future, resentment, or from the past by remembering past experiences. So then awareness always brings us into the now, the reality of here and now. And then in this sense of not, like one can be mindful of an object, like being mindful of this glass, and I'm being mindful now. But I have, to really drink, I have to forget about you for a moment. And then I look at you, and I can include you. So there's mindfulness of an object, and like people say, well, then if you're mindful, what about bank robbers? Well, they're obviously very mindful too. If you're going to rob a bank, you have to be, there's a lot of danger, and you just, have to be attuned to every sound, everything, that possibility of somebody finding you. But they don't have this mindfulness in this way, this wide open sense of looking, of seeing the desire to rob the bank as a condition that arises and ceases, or a sense of wanting something you don't have, like you want the money that's in the bank and it's not yours yet. And with mindfulness, we begin to see these intentions, these feelings of wanting something we don't have. Or we have things we don't want, wanting to get rid of them. And so that the Buddha's teaching is about recognizing these desires, and by blindly attaching to these desires, clinging to desires, we become that way. We become what we attach to. The identities we have, we become like that. If anger arises, then we grasp anger and we become an angry person. Or if we're really developed mindfulness, anger might arise, but we're aware of it and we don't grasp it. So then that anger, we don't become angry, but there's still anger there. You see, the perspective is seeing it in terms of a condition that arises and ceases, rather than seeing it as my anger, I shouldn't be angry, or I'm angry because you said something rude to me, and blaming it, or then we become somebody, a person again that becomes this anger, and we act and speak accordingly, or we suppress it. I shouldn't be angry, and we try to deny it and reject it. But with its mindfulness and consciousness, that's what we have, the gate to to this ultimate reality of consciousness, in which then we begin to trust that as our refuge rather than our own particular personal scenarios, views, opinions of life, and that can vary and change so easily. So seeing through delusion is through this practice, this development of mindfulness. And just in my experience of having lived as a Buddhist monk, this is my 44th year, I've had plenty of opportunity, 44 years, of, unrelenting opportunities. Because this is why the purpose of being a samana is to do this. It's not to be another identity, another ego kind of, to identify as being a Buddhist monk, and then grasp that perception. But if used properly, then it's merely an expedient means to reflect on how you see yourself, and to the way the discipline we all agree to living under is there so that it simplifies and it makes a fairly safe place to be, because there's a high level of trust, in terms of our commitment to this tradition, this discipline, in which the aim of it is to break through, seeing through the delusions that we inevitably have as human beings and as monks and nuns in Amaravati. So the tea now is manifested, another condition, and so I invite you all to have a cup of tea, and then in 20 minutes or so, if you're interested, we can discuss this subject, seeing through delusion.